Healthy sexuality after sexual trauma. Is it even possible? And if so, how do we do that? It's what we're talking about today. So let's start out with a couple of things. Sexual trauma is so devastating. It's like the foundation of your life has just been taken and jackhammered to pieces, right? It's just crumbled. And if you have a crumbled foundation, what do you build on? Your self-worth, your identity, all of it. And especially if you experienced a sexual trauma in your childhood, like, what do? We talk about experiencing trauma and reprogramming the nervous system and having a safe place to go back to. But the reality is, if you experienced sexual trauma in your childhood, you literally have nothing to go back to because there wasn't a safe place. And that is so challenging. So I just want to recognize that up front and just say kudos to you for being here, for showing up, to keep trying. You are not alone. You are supported, you are loved, and you will get through this. We will get through this together. So how to have healthy sexuality after sexual trauma, and is there such a thing? And if sexual trauma is all you know, if it happened at a young age, it feels like that's all sexuality is, and it can be incredibly triggering because those feelings of use and abuse and worthlessness pop up, and it's tied to anything sexual. And so you just kind of go, well, that's what sexuality is. People get used and abused, and that's sex. And I'm here to tell you that is not sex. That is an unhealthy, terrible facade of a funhouse mirror. But if it's all we know, that is our reality. And so how do we get back to something else? That sexuality is an expression of love and connection and intimacy, which it absolutely can be if used in a healthy way. So in my opinion, the first steps to healing from trauma are all the same. Like, first we have to recognize that we've been through a trauma. There has to be the understanding of how it's affected us, both physically and emotionally. And I think there is absolutely a spiritual component to sexual abuse, or that it's affected us on a soul level, whatever that looks like for you. It affects us on the very core of who we are and how we see ourselves and our safety in the world. And so that healing needs to take place at that very foundational level. So recognize that it was a trauma, recognize how it's affected you, and really dig into that and recognize the coping mechanisms that you have because of it, that you experienced this thing that wasn't safe, that really devastated you on a core level. And we almost immediately, especially when it comes to sexual traumas, have judgments about what those things said about us. Because we don't experience a sexual trauma and say, oh, well, let me tell you about what happened. I was horrifically abused by someone that perpetuated abuse, that didn't care about anyone besides themselves, that used me and abused me, and that person is responsible for all of that abuse. That isn't the way we see it. It doesn't matter if you experienced sexual trauma at 5 or 15 or 55. Like, we don't take that trauma and then make that trauma the responsibility of the abuser. To some extent, for whatever reason, that trauma is always internalized of, well, maybe I deserved it, or maybe I should have done more to stop it, or maybe I am somehow responsible or at fault for that sexual abuse on some level. I am here to tell you that that is absolutely not true. If you have experienced sexual abuse, you absolutely are the victim of that perpetrator. That doesn't mean that you are a victim in your life, in all areas of your life, but that person victimized you, and the only person responsible for that abuse is that person. So out of that trauma, out of that abuse, you came up with coping mechanisms. This could look like a lot of different things. This could look like being overtly happy and everything is fine and pretending like it didn't happen and disassociating from the abuse and putting that abuse in a closet. And you could be a drastically different person when the abuse takes place versus all other times. You could deal with this abuse by disassociating, right? There's times where people absolutely feel like on a spiritual soul level, they left their bodies and were separate from it when the abuse took place. You could have responded to this abuse by becoming overtly sexual. And in that case, that's so often when the victim gets blamed because of the response is, well, if I'm going to be used, if I'm going to be abused, at least I'm going to do it on my own terms. And at least I'm going to trade power and control for it. And so whatever those coping mechanisms have looked like for you, it's important to recognize that those coping mechanisms kept us safe in the moment. And our nervous system responded in a way that kept us safe in the moment. And so often those coping mechanisms that keep us safe can in the future keep us stuck. We're using those same coping mechanisms that were created out of a need for safety. And so often, we grow up, we're no longer in that unsafe situation. It's important to recognize that so often the coping mechanisms that we use to keep ourselves safe in the moment, we continue using those. And we're then applying that programming, we're applying those beliefs, that understanding in future circumstances or in present circumstances where we no longer have those threats in our lives. So whatever coping mechanisms you might have from experiencing a sexual trauma, you need to be loving and understanding that those behaviors, that programming came from a place and the need to keep yourself safe. And if you are hopefully in a place now where you're not needing to keep yourself safe, where those threats aren't pervasive, and you're still running on that same programming, that programming is no longer keeping you safe, it's keeping you stuck. And showing yourself love and kindness and understanding for that instead of judgment means so, so much. Because the reality is, we need to accept our experiences. Because to some extent, if our experiences are unacceptable, then we are unacceptable. While it is unacceptable that you experienced abuse and trauma, you are not unacceptable. You are loved, you are worthy, and you are cared for. So after you've gone through that process, you need to start reprogramming those beliefs that were born out of that trauma. You need to reprogram your mind, your body, and your spirit that you are no longer in that place of unsafety, that you are now in a place of safety and love. And there's a lot of ways to do this. And all of this is controlled by the nervous system, right? And so that's why when we go into parasympathetic response, when we go into fight or flight or freeze or fawn, when we go into any of those gears, that's our nervous system responding to a threat. And we need to learn how to regulate our nervous system and teach it that it's safe, and it's safe to be in the present moment. And there's so many tools to do this with. That's why deep breathing can be so beneficial, because it helps regulate our nervous system. Trauma-informed yoga can be so powerful, moving our body and our breathing as we work through these traumas, because when we experienced a sexual trauma, we didn't have control over our body or what was being done to our body. And that's why that expression, including movement with the body, can be so healing. Along with EMDR and EFT, having someone support you through releasing those incongruent beliefs that came from the sexual trauma. And when I talk about incongruent beliefs, I'm talking about the trauma that was experienced and what we believe about ourselves because we experienced that trauma. That I am unworthy, I am unloved, I am not clean. And all of that is completely not true. It's not true. But on a subconscious level, to some extent, we believe those things. And that's where our behavior and our programming comes up to create those circumstances in our life where we have those triggers. And So often when it comes to painful experiences, we want to hide them. We want to push them away in the corner. We want to ignore them and just pretend like they didn't happen because we don't know what to do with that pain. Or there's a small part of us that thinks, well, maybe those things are true, when they're really, really not. So having that support from a person, a group of people to lead you through that healing. Because when it comes to sexual trauma, it really is so devastating. It's not something that I would say, just figure it out on your own. You need the support, you need the guidance. It is you that's going to have to do that work, but there is hope for having those healthy relationships after you clear out all the cobwebs of those untrue, incongruent beliefs. If this video has been helpful, check out our video, What Boundaries Should You Have in a Relationship? And if you need some support in your healing journey, click the link below and schedule a complimentary call with one of our therapists that have been trained in healing from trauma, particularly sexual trauma. I would love to know, what have you done to heal from sexual trauma? There's so many triggers, so many challenges. What really supports you when you're in that place? And reminding yourself that you are safe, you are loved, you are cared for. Remember to subscribe, like, click the bell, and to keep shining. We need your light. Here comes the video. Check it out. It's got some good stuff in it. Winning!